some of us, it's morning or afternoon or evening. I'm glad to see Alexander Yarashuk. After the opening speech, Maria Elena will leave us, but one of the positive features of the online communication is that we can visit several continents at once during one meeting, but live communication, of course, is much more pleasant. We cannot underestimate offline meetings. Maybe Yelena Kulibina will have to inform the participants about the house rules.
Да, здравствуйте. Пожалуйста, основное правило, пожалуйста, выключайте
The most important
микрофоны.
rule for us is to keep our mics
Вы можете переключаться на русский или английский канал. Если вы хотите слушать на английском канале, то вы все время остаетесь на английском канале. Если вы хотите слушать на русском канале, то вы переключаетесь на русский канал.
Simultaneous interpretation will be available during the meeting.
Если вы что-то хотите сказать, то вы
If you would like to say something, to comment, then raise your hand. Use the chat.
Mamadou, do you want to say something from practical point?
For the time being, I think everything is okay. I think there is no more to add, except as Elena said, we need to see how to manage the microphone and others. But I think the most important thing is also we share already the executive summary into Russian. And for those who don't have it, we share it via the chat and we will have time to discuss further. Thanks.
And all researchers are connected, I see. All authors and speakers are connected. It's very important. And so,
yeah.
Good. And just for if something, we will find way how to translate in, because in chat, many of people saw you writing in Russian, but we will help if will be questions how to translate into English. So, okay, just
Sergeyus, you are muted.
Yes, I'm just because I'm now calling, so just to checking with Maria Helena. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, she's connected also.
She's connected already. Okay.
Yeah.
So just we can start, and Maria Helena, please, floor is yours. All participants ready, and so I just make my practical introduction. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sergeyus, and good morning or good afternoon to all of you. And I would like to welcome you all to the launch of this edition of the International Journal of Labor Research.
Исследований сферы труда. И я бы хотела воспользоваться этой возможностью, чтобы поприветствовать всех
that are present today with us at this meeting. I have to say that your participation today signals the importance of this flagship publication. And what we want is to stimulate discussions on the important role of workers and their organizations to shape the recovery policies from COVID-19 pandemic. And it is also with great pleasure that I welcome Dr. Jukka Takala, Shima Klananahan, and Dunja Krause, who have agreed to join us today and to provide further insight on the contributions that they have made to the journal. Well, dear friends, the past year and a half have been truly unprecedented. And this is reflected not just in the virtual modality in which we come together in this meeting, but also in how it has shaped the scope and the urgency to further explore the different dimensions in which particularly workers and their representative organizations have been impacted by the crisis. Titled COVID-19 and Recovery, the Role of Trade Unions in Building Forward Better, this edition of the journal provides great insights into both challenges that were already apparent for a number of years, but which have been put to the forefront due to the impact of the COVID-19, and also issues that are entirely new and for which we will require novel ideas in how in the ILO ACTRAV and the labor movement as a whole, we can tackle them effectively. And for this, I would like to thank the authors that have contributed to this journal. As mentioned before, 1.5 years ago, during the launch of our last ACTRAV journal, on what was in 2019 considered the future of work, could we have perceived such a profound and almost instantaneous shock that would threaten lives and livelihoods of millions of workers around the globe? And to date, more than 185 million people have been affected, and tragically, more than 4 million have lost their lives. And while the pandemic is getting more and more controllable in some regions of the world, this is certainly not the case around the globe, as new variants are threatening the little progress made over the last few months, and the access to vaccines is very uneven across the world. And on top of that, the social and economic consequences have been severe, with the simultaneous demand and supply shock hitting workers and employers and dragging the global economy into a recession in a manner not seen since the first half of the 20th century. And what is particularly striking is just how unequally the impact of this pandemic has been, not just across countries, but also within countries. Exacerbating already existing inequalities, COVID-19 has primarily hit lives and livelihoods of those that have already been in precarious situations prior to the crisis. Informal economy workers, where women, migrant workers, or young workers are overrepresented, workers in precarious work arrangements or new forms of work, such as in the platform economy, have seen income and employment reduced dramatically, which threatens to put millions of workers into poverty. I would like to draw your attention on the challenges and long-term problems which, in light of the COVID-19, become actual as never before. New release of the I2C Trade Union Rights Index proves our concern on the growing numbers of trade union rights violence cases, and illustrations of this situation are, for example, the last freedom of association complaints received from Ukraine, Hungary, and Kyrgyzstan, active and pending serious cases without significant progress, Belarus, the Russian Federation, Kazakhstan, and in the meantime, a growing populist and right-wing movements, and also the reduction of the civil society rights and mandates. And I have to say that the latest developments in Belarus and the fact that all 5 shortlisted Committee of Application of Standards cases on the International Labour Conference this year have been from Eastern Europe and Central Asia. And this perfectly illustrates the arguments I was putting on the table. Out of 5 cases, 4 have been examined on the fundamental conventions: Belarus, Kazakhstan on 87, Romania on 98, and Turkmenistan on 105. In some countries, unprotected and unacceptable discriminations became dominating, especially forced labor, discrimination at the workplace by reasons of trade union membership, gender, age, or nationality. The workers in the most vulnerable situations, as I've said, migrant workers, informal workers, young people, and women, as well as workers with family responsibilities, required special actions and special attention from the trade union side. And I can assure you that ACTRAV will continue to provide the methodical and the technical assistance for the unions in the region to promote the implementation of fundamental principles and rights at work conventions, but also decent work conditions to all workers. And despite being blissfully ignorant in 2019 on the future to come, this growing inequality was one of the key themes of the ILO's deliberations of the future of work, which culminated in the adoption of the Centenary Declaration by the International Labour Conference. Its human-centered agenda has guided both the ILO and its constituents towards a more equitable recovery, and as such, the Centenary Declaration has been the cornerstone for the recently adopted Global Call to Action for a Human-Centered COVID-19 Recovery. And with this, the ILO and all constituents have agreed less than a month ago the most important steps forward towards a recovery that leaves no one behind and that strives towards a world of work that is more resilient to shocks in the future. And I'm happy to report that many of the themes which were highlighted by our constituents in this call for action are also reflected in the issues that our authors have addressed in the journal, providing important insights and also important recommendations towards a human-centered recovery. I will not preempt the important discussions that will follow throughout this event on very specific topics. However, I would like to make 3 more general remarks, which became very evident to me while reading the different papers and which I have also further outlined in the preface to this journal. The first one is that trade unions matter, and probably now more than ever. Workers, in particular, those who are most vulnerable, who have no access to any form of a safety net during this crisis, need the support of trade unions, and trade unions need to provide essential services as well to give workers, all workers, a voice during this pandemic. Second is that social dialogue remains the key vehicle through which we ensure that policies are both designed and implemented in a manner which takes the most important needs of workers and employers into consideration. There are some encouraging success stories of governments, employers, and workers coming together in times of crisis. However, this is still not the reality for many countries around the world, and very much to the detriment of making the recovery as inclusive as possible. And lastly, we see this crisis not just as a threat, but also an opportunity for the revitalization of a labor movement which has been in decline for several decades now. Going forward, we need to look beyond what may seem as overwhelming events that are impacting trade unions around the world. The future, how bleak it may seem now, is not something which is exogenous, but is one that can and needs to be formed by the labor movement towards a more equitable and a just world of work. And the greater precariousness of the world of work is a call to assess internally how trade unions can remain and strengthen their voice for all workers, particularly those who are most vulnerable and do not have a voice of their own. So I'm therefore very proud, and I would like to thank my colleagues from ACTRAV that have also contributed to the success of this journal, but I'm very proud, as I was saying, to present to you a journal that will provide important recommendations for workers' representatives across the globe on how to tackle the most profound challenges of our time. I therefore wish you all an interesting read, and I would like to express my sincere thanks again to all those that have contributed to this edition of the journal for an excellent outcome. I wish you a very good discussion, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Maria Helena, for this good, important and kind words. And just I want to mention that we have around 100 participants from 24 countries. So because you can see figures that is 60, 70, but some organization and some people connected from one device and from offices. So despite the hot summer, middle of summer vacation period, and again big wave of pandemic, so people connected, the trade union members and leaders connected, and so it shows how it's timely and important this is our journal. Now I would like to give floor to my colleague who is engine of all this researches, communication, meetings, and who pushed me several times, Sergei, we need to do something from a very important and for European region, for Eastern Europe, and we need to translate into Russian. We need to translate in some Serbian, Croatian. And so it's my colleague, my good friend, Mamadou. Mamadou, please, floor is yours. And so you are very, you are very welcome, and always we are expecting you to work with our region much more. And so, okay, please.
Thank you very much, Sergeius, and good morning to all of you. And I want also to join my voice to Maria-Elena to welcome all of you and also to share my greetings to Dr. Yuka, but I see also Dr. Dimitri and all the authors who are joining us for this meeting. If you allow me, I would like to give you quickly an overview about the journal, what are the key findings and what are the key recommendations that we can take away from this journal. And before that, maybe for those who don't know me, my name is Mamadou Soare, and I am the head of communication and also publication for ACTRAV. And actually, I'm also the coordinator of the International Journal of Labor Research. And we are very pleased to share with you this new edition 2021. And as you see in the chat, we have also the executive summary, which is now available into Russian as well. And please, then I think we hope these discussions will be very useful and helpful for you. Let me now share my screen to quickly give you an idea about what we find from the journal and what actions we would like to recommend. First, can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, so I think let me start quickly. First, as you can see, we would like to convey to you 5 key findings. The first one is the fact that, as Maria-Elena said, trade unions remains key actors to ensure a human-centered recovery. So instead, despite the fact that there is a lot of challenge, there are a lot of challenges that have been increasing the loss of membership, we see more and more unions are able to adapt and to protect workers during, but also beyond the COVID-19 pandemic. But one interesting thing that we look at also is the fact that there are new services that unions have been able to deliver to their members. One of them is definitely providing guidance, providing trainings, providing different assistance or services in order to assist them to protect their lives, but also how to find new jobs across the country. And one article that illustrated very well is the article that we have from the Southeast Asia, and we think this experience is also, I think, the same for other regions as well. The second finding is the fact that social dialogue is definitely one of the key vehicles and very important for many reasons. One, it is the fact that if unions are able, what we realize through the journal when we prepare a global survey with unions is the fact that when unions are able to work through social dialogue with employers and the government, we see a global increase of 26% of union membership. And there are also many countries where unions have been able to use social dialogue as a response to the pandemic. You see 83% across the world we see unions are using that as a vehicle to respond to the pandemic. Another important reason to use social dialogue is the fact that it is also an effective way of influencing, at least to share recommendation or to share proposal to implement or to influence national recovery plans or also macroeconomics and social policies that government want to prepare or to deliver in order to address the crisis of the COVID-19. Okay. The number 3 from the findings is also the fact that, as you know, social dialogue is very important, and we see from the experience the fact that when social dialogue the social dialogue system is there, it's more prepared to address the different crises, including what's happened now with the COVID-19. And that's why it is very important, according to the authors, that the social dialogue system, the social protection system needs to be part of the different policy responses to the COVID-19. And this is also as a follow-up of what we discussed during the ILC, where social protection is definitely one of the key priority, and in particular, how to extend and how to finance social protection to all workers. The number 4 findings is related to gender equality. What we realize from the journal when we started is the fact that across the world, we see really the fact that the COVID-19 have created more challenges in order to reach out to the gender equality. Because what we realize is, for the time being, around 47 million women and girls are now falling into the extreme poverty due to the pandemic. But another important fact, colleagues, is due to the fact that the gender-based violence and the discrimination against women are increasing during the pandemic, when we have all these restrictions and lockdown measures across the countries. The final key findings that we would like to convey to you is the fact that indeed we realize, and you agree with me on this, is the fact that digitalization is on our way, and the acceleration of this digital transformation is a fact. So, but there are some challenges. One of them is definitely this question of connectivity, but how also to make sure there is a work-life balance for workers when we are working on the remote from home. We see also some opportunities linked to the digital transformation. Definitely one of them is the fact that it is one way to increase membership and to also increase the gender participation in different union activities. We see this experience, and you will have one article dedicated to digitalizations. Now, let me quickly convey to you five takeaway, let's say 5 actions that we think unions can take in order to revitalize the trade union movement. And as Marilena said, yes, the COVID-19 is a global crisis, but it can be also an opportunity to revitalize trade unions across the world. And one action that we think and authors are recommending is definitely to have an innovative strategies to address multiple transitions. And you have different transitions, not only transition from informal economy to formal economy, but one of them is definitely the environmental change. We have also this technological change, but also the move from manufacturing to services sectors, which are growing into different countries. The second key action that we would like to recommend from the journal is the fact that indeed there is a need for more and more social dialogue is needed in order to create 2 things. One, it is how to reinforce the union-friendly environment across the countries, but also this is, as we said, you will see in the journal that social dialogue is a very effective vehicle to influence national recovery plans that government would like to implement across the countries to address the COVID pandemic. The number 3 takeaway is related to the protection of workers and jobs and also incomes. This is one of the key recommendations that we realize, and as a major concern coming from unions and from trade unions members and from workers across the world. They are more and more concerned about how to protect their jobs and incomes and how to protect their lives. So I think there is a need to have this as a priority in order to see how first promote and implement the ILS, the International Labour Standards, as an instrument to protect workers, but also how to advocate towards your government and employers for the creation of decent jobs and the protections of incomes in the post-COVID world. The number 4 actions that we would like to recommend is definitely the need and the urgency related to the engagement of unions to address what we call the global challenges. And the global challenges are are several. But let me just give you one of them. You have definitely this question of youth. We are talking about the lost generation today, and we would like also to see how unions can address the gender equality, the question of just transitions, and I'm happy that Dimitri will talk about it in a few minutes. And also the question of universal access to social protection, the question of occupational safety and health, but as we see also the protection of workers' rights, because we see that in many countries, government are using this COVID-19 pandemic as an opportunity or as an argument to restrict or to violate some workers' rights across the countries. And finally, we need also, and this is, I think, also very important, we need more unity, but also solidarity from unions across the countries in order to reinforce their image and influence, but also to build the post-COVID world. We are talking about solidarity for vaccine, but we need also to reinforce the solidarity among trade unions movement. Now, before concluding, I just want to share with you where you can find all the resources, the publications. Definitely it is on the ILO's website, on the ACTRAV page, but you will also follow us through the social media that you will see here. So I would like to stop here and thank you very much. Over to you, Sergei.
Thank you very much, Mamadou. This is just summary of conclusion and findings and introduction. And so just I have a big hope, and I think after this meeting, you also will get for next edition some articles and materials from this region also, and I bet we will discuss more about it. So now we will just move to the presentation, and I'm so very glad to introduce Jukka Takala, President of World Commission on Occupation and Health. But so Jukka, I guess you can also more introduce yourself to participants. And of course, this topic is extremely important, and we discussed so many times. And it's one of the main, I can say, during all our discussion, and so occupation, health and safety on COVID-19 and injuries and all this. So what is going at workplace? Floor is yours, Jukka, please.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning in Geneva. Bonjour, Mamadou. Dobry den in Moscow, and really nice to talk to you all. It's an important event, and I think it's also important that we are talking to different kind of people in different countries on the same problems. Unfortunately, the problems of occupational health and occupational safety are pretty international, pretty global. But I think it's really nice to have this opportunity to talk to you, particularly in the Eastern Europe. I think if I hope you can see my screen over here. Is it okay? Just wonder if it's.
Yes, we can see it, Dr. Jukka.
Okay, so fine. And I think I just put the full screen if I can find a way here over there. You can see even better if I have the full screen. Okay, still okay? So I come from the International Commission of Occupational Health. I have an international career. I worked 26 years for the ILO International Labour Organization in different parts of the world, on 3 continents, in Africa and Asia, and then finally leading the occupational safety and health program in Geneva for 20 years or so. So that is something what is my history, but also working in the European Union after that, and some other places as well. But I think what we talk here is the COVID and the recovery and the injuries and diseases. So exactly as Mamadou was mentioning, that occupational safety and health and social protection is a wider concept. We need access to everybody in the whole world. So it must be universal access for social protection, but also universal health and safety care in the whole world. So I think this is an important thing to keep in mind. So I go to the next slide. This is the whole picture, and I'm having the picture made out of a WHO region. So the region in WHO covering most of the countries where you are coming from is called Euro region. The headquarters is located in Copenhagen, but covering countries from the eastern part of Europe until the most eastern part of, or what should I say, western part of Russia in Vladivostok and so on. I think this is something what, if you look at the pictures of the pillars over here, you can see the high pillars in the Southeast Asian region of WHO and Western Pacific region. That's not because they are really bad, but because they have a high population. These are absolute numbers. And that's why the Euro numbers, the area are lower. It doesn't mean that there is less or more problems, but it is a smaller population in the Euro region, covering in orange color in this map on the right-hand side in the corner over here. So I think if you compare, for example, the Euro area and, for example, Southeast Asia and Africa here, there's a lot of communicable diseases in Southeast Asia and Africa, while there's not many communicable diseases in the Euro region, neither in the high-income areas or some of the others. But this is maybe the case without COVID. This is the data what we got from 2019. So now we do have somewhat different picture once COVID has taken over. But this gives the total picture, but also keep in mind that there are many other problems. Particularly big problem in the Euro region is the circulatory diseases, cardiovascular diseases and stroke in your brains and so on. These are big things. But equally also you have a number of accidents. These are fatalities over here, so fatal cases and some of the others. But I think cancer here is the brown thing. Also a big thing in the Euro region. If you go to the next picture over here, is covering the whole world problems in 2019 still, but then you also can add the numbers of COVID here, because if you look at the COVID-19 death in 2020, you have to add another 20,000 over there. And I was in the World Health Assembly just 1 month ago or so in end of May, where Dr. Tedros from WHO said that there was 115,000 until end of May this year. So this figure here, 60,000, is the year 2020, which is comparable to the pie chart here. And if you look at today's figure, is 120,000 people dying at work from the 4 million total. So in a way, I could say luckily, most people who are working, they are healthy. They are, because they work. They are not the old age people who die much more frequently, and they are at the same time more healthier than the sort of elderly population and those who are out of work. But this doesn't mean that COVID is less of a problem. In fact, if you look at the elderly who are dying very frequently from the old age homes, they are not going to discos or concerts or theaters or streets or bars. It's the workers who are getting the disease into the elderly homes. And then those people, those workers need to be much more sort of aware of the problem in order to, and they have to be much better protected too, so they don't transfer, they are active population, so that they don't transfer the disease further to the vulnerable populations in the world. This includes not only the health workers, but many others as well. But still we have to keep in mind that there are many other major problems like the circulatory diseases in the whole world and particularly in the Euro area, respiratory problems, cancers and so on, and accidents and so on as well. If we look at the major problems at work, this is not covering everything in the world, but the major things we talk about as in the pie, and we are talking about more of the fatal cases. There are also other problems which are non-fatal, so I come to that after a while, but cancer, circulatory diseases are key problems. Also the infectious diseases, which here we find the protection against animals, insects, snakes, bacteria, and viruses, as well as we have carcinogens, asbestos, radiation, and so on here in cancer, and shift work and overwork, long work for circulatory diseases and so on. Passive smoking also one of those. So I think we cannot eliminate diseases at work. What we can eliminate are the individual factors, modifiable factors behind. So one by one, continuously. This is not a project activity that today we are eliminating COVID and next year something else. No, all of those factors need to be continuously every year covered by the workplaces, by the management and the workers together to get better conditions that so that we don't have the problems at work. And I think this more than 2.8 million people dying at work and lots of other things what take place in long-term sicknesses and permanent disabilities, what are making the things really worse in those workplaces. So we also calculated this figure of the what is 2020, year 2020 was 3% of the 2 million is the 3%. That's what we call attributable fraction. The percentage caused by work. It's pretty low, 3%, while all the other diseases like heart attack, cardiovascular diseases is much, much higher, and cancer 14%, circulatory death here 14%. But if you look at not only the fatal cases, but the diseases, then suddenly this problem is much, much higher because of the active workers are the active population who are going around and getting the infections and contaminating, infecting other people. And exact direct work itself causes some 20% of the disease. So this is a huge burden out of the whole COVID burden itself. So of course, all of those need prevention and they all need the individual factors to be identified. If in some cases, for example, you can eliminate the factors altogether, like you can eliminate smoking at work, or you can eliminate asbestos at work, and so on. At the same time, you can also have other measures, such as, for example, in COVID, you have distances, you have the cleaning and not working together in the big groups and not having big crowds shouting and singing like in the football matches and things like that. Particularly inside areas is important thing. If you look at what are exactly the problems at the workplace level, I think even WHO, they are recognizing that those people who are treating others, such as nurses and so on, are at the high risk, but not only those. This study has been made here in my country, in Finland, and looking at what are the different occupations affected. And equally, for example, painters in the construction site, construction cleaners, they are the ones who are cleaning just before the clients come into the new building or modified building or improved, revitalized building. These also have a high, this odds ratio means 3 times higher. So just working in some place may mean 3 times higher risk for those who work in those occupations. So the special nurses, they are not the medical doctors who are normally well protected, but the nurses who every day deal with those are the ones who will get this high risk. And if you look at the different corona viruses, the variants, like the alpha, beta, and delta variant coming from India, some of those variants may have 1.3 times higher risk and up to 1.8 times the risk, but just working in some occupations may have 2.5 times the risk, like the painters, but and for special nurses, 3 times higher risk than other people. And a wide number of professionals, including mining, manufacturing, construction, and of course, health professionals, drivers, and so on, travel attendants, conductors of buses and taxis, and so on. People who meet other people, they are exactly the ones who are in a big risk. So there are a lot of factors what can be taken care of, can be eliminated to reduce the factor or eliminate or reduce the contamination. So I think these are the key points what we have to keep in mind in order to make universal occupational health and safety care as well. So my summary here is that occupational diseases are common diseases are occupational, and they need prevention, protection, and taking care. Thank you very much.
Kiitos, Professor Jukka. So I'm sure we will have many questions to you, and I would like to please stay with us till the end. And because the topic, as I mentioned before in my introduction, topic is extremely important, and we really appreciate your good and deep analysis and good work. And of course, so we will have some questions to you, and to also wish to attend. Hope you will attend our discussion. So now we move to the second presenter. I would like to give floor to just sorry if my pronunciation will be not clear. Dania Krause. She's a researcher at the United Nations Research Institute for Social Development, and so she will. That you are connected, yes, Dunya. Okay. Yeah. So please, floor is yours, and you can introduce on behalf of all authors and Dimitris and so, and just and which is what time now is? You are in United States?
No, I'm based in Geneva as well.
Ah, you are based in Geneva. Sorry. Okay.
No.
Yeah, because with Colorado University. Sorry for the mistake. But yeah. So floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and thank you first of all for the invitation, both to contribute to the journal and to present our work here. As you already mentioned, it's a paper that I've worked on together with Dimitris Stevis from the Colorado State University and Edouard Morena from the University of London Institute in Paris, and we're also the co-coordinators of the Just Transition Research Collaborative, or JTRC in short, which is quite important in guiding our work in this area, and which convenes experts from academia and civil society to collectively map and analyze different understandings and narratives of just transition. And in our paper, we're suggesting, or the title was Towards Just Transitions for All, Lessons from the Pandemic. And I think what we focused on was picked up in the introductory speech a little bit, because we are starting basically from the point of looking at COVID, not so much in terms of the devastating, far-reaching, highly uneven impacts, but more the opportunity that the recovery moment brings in bringing the world on a different, more sustainable path that can also strengthen the public sphere and tackle some of these inbuilt inequalities. And we believe that just transition is a really important and promising concept in this regard, that can really give a central role to the voice of workers and frontline communities. And as many labor unions, as well as the ILO has already argued, just transitions are necessary for all transitions, environmental and social. Otherwise, transitions will always reproduce inequalities and be unjust. And I think what is also important for us is to really make sure that we understand these interlinkages and the importance of seeing the environmental and the social as inexorably linked and connected, and addressing transitions with this integrative perspective in mind. As you may know, the just transition is mostly referred to in the climate change context. Historically, it came more from environmental transitions in logging and chemicals. Increasingly, it is also associated with food, biodiversity, other environmental transitions necessary for sustainability. And the challenge, I think, is really that we need to address the total environment rather than minimize climate change by pointing out autonomous dynamics of other environmental transitions. But of course, the social is also an important part in this, right? The transitions that have been the result of unregulated economic agreements, automation, Industry 4.0, migration, liberalization, inequality, and so on have affected workers around the world. And the Just Transition Listening Project in the US has strongly underscored that many people who have been affected by such unjust transitions feel bitter and prone to accept false promises and exclusionary and discriminatory claims of nationalists, so then kind of leading to increasing nationalist politics and more problems in the long run. Having made this case, we hold that all environmental policies have social implications and all social policies have environmental implications. Just transitions that do not attend to the environment cause damage to it and by extension to people and the nature associated with it. For example, a socially just transition for miners that does not attend to the environmental impacts of a transition from mining or other forms of extraction damages natures, land, freshwater, or seas, and then by consequence also the people that depend on it, such as farmers, cities, fisher people, or tourist industry. In short, while we must attend to all transitions, whether environmental or social, all transitions must fuse social and environmental values because they are inseparable. In that context, it is useful to think of just transition in three categories. For the most part, we associated just transition with transitions from the past, that is, industries that are declining due to technological changes or damages that they cause. But we should also think about just transitions into the future with respect to emerging industries and services to ensure that they are more inclusive demographically while moving us towards a more protected and empowered workforce. But we must also highlight the need for just transition within the present in sectors that are neither new nor declining, such as healthcare or education. And I think that has become very clear due to the COVID pandemic. With the above in mind, leaving the service sector out of just transitions would marginalize a substantial and growing part of the world of labor. Leaving out the care sector will do the same, with particular impacts on women, migrant workers, and precarious workers around the world. We explore just transitions for all, using healthcare as an important issue in itself and as an application of the JTRC's analytical scheme that uses breadth, so the question of who is included and covered, and depth in terms of the social and ecological priorities of a transition. It is possible for a policy to be broad to the point where it covers all people and the nature affected, but also socially inegalitarian and ecologically damaging. At the same time, it is possible for policy to be egalitarian ecological, but limited to very particular people and places. We combine these two dimensions to differentiate among just transitions in terms of ambition and have distinguished a range of different approaches from status quo to more transformative eco-social transitions. With the above in mind, we find that a healthcare just transition must be geographically broad, including global measures, because healthcare involves global corporations, pandemics cross boundaries, and the healthcare systems of industrial countries depend on immigrant workers. It must also be demographically broad because the labor force in the healthcare sector is diverse, with many women and migrants who are neither unionized nor organized and do not enjoy adequate occupational health and safety standards, social protection, or workplace rights. What is important to note then is that a sector that seems national compared to a sector such as energy, which we assume to be global, is actually much less insulated and much more globalized. Like in energy, national policies over the last several decades have helped create national healthcare systems, but these are embedded, and increasingly so, within global divisions of labor and associated geopolitics. In terms of social depth, although effective social dialogue gives the weaker more voice, dialogue without the possibility of some redistribution renders voice a formality. Even amongst those who are unionized, there is a need for stronger social dialogue. Socialized healthcare is at the heart of the welfare state around the world. Like any other element of the social welfare state, it is not based solely on bipartite or even tripartite social dialogues. Rather, it is part of a broader social transition that has taken place as a result of long-term political strategies involving parties, churches, and unions. The world of labor, therefore, must be part of wider coalitions to achieve politics that empower workers within an eco-social state and society. As we noted, it's not possible to assume that social policies will not have environmental impacts, and more than assume that environmental policies will not have social impacts. Just transitions in healthcare and all other social transitions must be ecologically sound. Social sectors contribute to the unfolding ecological and climate crisis, but they also play an important role in mitigating and adapting to them. Green transitions in services, including specific sectors such as health and education, drive profound changes in energy and manufacturing. For example, a move to renewable energy in healthcare, education, leisure, and related service will inexorably modify energy provision because of the massive footprint of those sectors. Similarly, a move of those industry away from single-use products will have a profound impact on the plastics, paper, pharmaceutical, and related industries. What the pandemic is teaching us is that crises and disasters are not episodic, but part of the fabric of our civilization. They do not solely require damage control and management, but a more profound reorganization to address both the next crises and the slow violence, if you will, of persistent crises that affect the most vulnerable elements of nature and society. This requires a massive social transition to mitigate and adapt, and that requires a just transition of the various labor forces involved towards more voice and decent work. We know that such transitions are not the automatic result of crisis, but require political effort. We also know that many of the transitions resulting from crisis are anything but just or even humane. With the above in mind, we argue that we need to pay close attention to the various policies that promise to deal with this and other crises and disasters. In order to provide some food for thought, we place them into a continuum from those that seek to simply prevent the falling apart of largely inegalitarian, unecological orders to those that move us in the direction of more egalitarian and ecological orders for all that are affected. Market solutions or temporary counter-crisis programs reproduce existing inequalities and drive unjust transitions. Worth noting here is that such measures may not be market-based, but may be limited to protecting only our own. Managerial reforms, such as many of the disciplinary measures to prevent the spread of the crisis, are more profound and impactful, also focusing on preventing disorder rather than building a more accessible healthcare system. Structural reforms, such as universal and effective healthcare, makes health a right rather than a benefit, as PSI argues, for example. In some countries, such systems are already in place, and they're worthy of emulation, despite creeping privatization and the fact that pharmaceutical industry is private. Even those countries, however, benefit from immigration as well as privileged position within the global political economy of health. It's not at all clear that if all the immigrant healthcare workers in Sweden or the UK were to go back to their countries of origin, they would be able to address the crisis there. What is certain that without them, Sweden and the UK would not be able to provide the services that they offer. Finally, transformative healthcare transitions are part of a broader eco-social public sphere that promotes social and environmental rights and justice. Such a transformative system would not only cover the consumption of health, but also socialize the whole healthcare sector, including pharmaceuticals and equipment. Moreover, it would address the global footprint of healthcare. A Green New Deal that doesn't benefit only the global north, broadly construed, could be a step in that direction. Workers' organizations must choose between narrow and largely ad hoc transition programs and comprehensive and proactive just transition policies. In such a case, just transition policies will be part of a larger political agenda that treats unjust transitions as they emerge rather than pit one just transition against another. Such policies will require a great deal of initial effort, but are more likely to deliver the alliances needed for meaningful eco-social change. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dunya, for extremely good and important presentation. So I hope you will stay with us and we will be able to answer questions. I'm sure participants have many questions and to you. And now, so I want to say sorry because due to some technical and extra emergency reasons, our authors of third announced article on human and trade union rights they're not able to join us today. But so what we can promise, one of advantage of it maybe that we will have additional 10 minutes for our discussion. But so what I can suggest, and I'm sure Mamadou support it. So we will translate all this article into Russian language. As human and trade union rights, it's extremely important topic for our region. And as Maria Helena mentioned it on last ILC, International Labour Conference, there's been 4 cases on fundamental conventions on trade union right violence and on the human right violence, in fact, because enforced labor and collective bargaining violence and so and so. So we need to have a special event and maybe special webinar meeting and discussion on this topic. So I suggest that we will have, when all article will be translated and we will agree with authors and our audience in the region, and we will have a special separate event for it. So now we can move to the panel discussion and we can start to discuss, as you can see according to the program. And I'm very happy to give a floor now to my good colleague, my good friend. We know each other many, many years and work always closely together. And so it's Executive Secretary of Pan-European Regional Council of the International Trade Union Confederation, Anton Lepik. Anton, please, floor is yours.
Спасибо большое, Сергиус. Я буду говорить по-русски, поскольку...
Thank you, Sergius. I think the majority of our participants speak Russian. So I will speak Russian. Thank you for organizing this important event and also for uniting under one umbrella, in one publication, uniting so important concerns, so relevant topics, especially for the world of trade unions. I would start with a similar message voiced by Maria Elena in her introductory speech, when she spoke about the significance of the fundamental document that was adopted 2 years ago at the international conference, the Centennial Declaration of the International Labour Organization on the future of work. This declaration set forth the principles and priorities and also the mechanisms of solving the challenges of the day, not to ignore the negative tendencies, the negative trends of the macroeconomic model, to prompt, to encourage the national institutions and the international institutions to also adjust their own policies in the labor relations in the world of work. I believe that this document serves as a flagship that will guide us to a new reality and also will guide us to having a new collective agreement. Before COVID-19, the trade unions, the international trade unions spoke about the new collective agreement, collective bargaining. And due to this disaster, we, in fact, found new opportunities. I think now we have more members under our flag than we used to have before the declaration was issued or adopted. And among the most profound thinkers of the day, there are economists and researchers on environmental issues. There are more and more voices that agree with the major pillars of the international trade union movement that are also stated in this declaration on the future of work. The challenges that we are facing today disillusioned us in terms of the sustainability of the social and economic model. We used to think that the biological threat would not be able to crush our house of cards. A year and a half ago, the entire world was in total shock and in panic. Now we are still trying to relive through this shock, but we have already something to orient at. Our borders, the free market, and the role of the governments, all this was a myth, and all the institutions that within a particular country could regulate people's lives, everything was now in uncertainty. In the European Union, we saw that the countries are not united, there are borders. We saw that there are first-rate people who are covered and have access to social protection, and there are second-rate people who are ignored. There are people who can negotiate better work conditions with their employers and people who can sustain their income, and also workers who are unprotected and have to risk their lives on a daily basis. As if we saw our reality through a magnifying glass. COVID-19 is a magnifying glass that detected severe problems. Due to COVID-19, we made progress in understanding vulnerability of our citizens, of our populations. For trade unions, maybe this was not a new picture, but for a lot of politicians, for the representatives of the global elite, the reforms became obvious. G7 and G20 countries now recognize that the trade unions would take the lead in the future. There are 5 important areas that need to be included into a new collective bargaining agreement. First of all, decent green jobs. The policy of recovery should take into account our demand for green, decent jobs. Success of the recovery depends on new, green, decent jobs. Secondly, human rights and the workers' rights. Universal, comprehensive rights for all. Notwithstanding type of employment, irrespective of the labor relations. And here we look not only at the informal workers, but in general, we look at all non-traditional forms of employment, including platform economies and the employment related to digitization. We are talking about universal human rights, the right to collective bargaining and freedom of association, control of the working hours, adequate pay, occupational health and safety. The next area of activities is universal social coverage, our solidarity and distribution of common. We talk also not only about vulnerable groups, but also vulnerable countries. Social protection should cover populations irrespective of the status. Not long ago, I read an interesting, very useful article that I think will also states most important challenges. The article discusses whether social coverage should be sectoral, but we understand that there are conventions that argue that there is a vertical and horizontal system of distribution of social services. I think this article is useful, and I would like to share a link with you, and maybe we will have an internal discussion on this social coverage. Next area of activities is elimination of discrimination and inequality. And one of the articles of this journal is related to gender equality, and I would like to also emphasize the ratification of convention that was adopted in 2019. This convention is especially relevant today when people work from homes. Prevention of harassment at work, harassment and abuse at work, Convention 190. And finally, the fifth area of activities is inclusion, financial fair taxation, fair distribution of material resources, this is again giving everyone is entitled to the same rights in terms of health, occupational safety, and also access to vaccination, because as Maria Helena said, this is not universal for all. This access now is not universal. A year and a half when we were in panic and in shock, we had we had the first meeting, and ACTRAV and International Confederation of Trade Unions were in search of solutions, in search of good stories of success, and everybody recognized that in the countries where social dialogue is well developed, chaos was not that obvious, and these countries found sustainable solutions in keeping with the changing situation. Today, a year after the ILO summit on challenges of COVID-19, we have accumulated a lot of interesting practices. There are a lot of data, a lot of articles, publications on that we can trust. There is a lot of research to support the trade union discussion, so that we could, in a very concise form and in a very simple language, we can now summarize the findings and conclusions made by the academic community and by strategic decision makers. As a proposal or as a suggestion, we could look at how the articles of the journal could be adapted not only for international trade union leaders, but to adapt it to common public, so that we could use these articles when we address practical issues here and when we speak to our members. I think this language should be easier and it should be adapted. We need to look into an easy representation of our findings so that it could be used for awareness campaigns. My colleagues mentioned already the crucial importance of the social dialogue and the opportunities that the crisis gave us. I do think that we need to be positive and see the crisis in a very positive light. Not once in the past 20 or even 30 years had we such a great support to the trade union movement. I think now it's time to promote our fundamental principles, and the world will now try to identify a new economic model, a new social model. There are several initiatives on behalf of the European Union. There was a summit in Porto and several regulations and framework agreements will bring the discussion to a new level. When we talk about the European social model, it will be reconsidered. I think at the time of the dominating liberal ideology, especially in Central Europe, there is in neoliberal dogmatism is still alive in many countries, and I think this is a wrong ideology. Dogmatic thinking is impossible today. I think especially if Ukraine will agree with me that this type of thinking is unacceptable today, and there is now a new spiraling wave of attacks in Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, and Hungary, new attacks at trade unions and at the idea of collective bargaining. Under the slogan of fighting with COVID-19, people hide other agenda and a different agenda. Now, COVID-19 restrictions and the lockdown measures allow our politicians to manipulate the public opinion and reject our right to protest, our right to meet. There is now the civil rights are at risk in many of our countries. Belarus gives us probably the most, a very sad example. As for positive positive points in terms of occupational health and safety, the trade unions are able to advocate the workers' rights, and employers now recognize that they need to ensure, guarantee safety at work. Before the crisis, the situation was also quite sad. Jukka Takala made clear in his report that occupational health and safety has always been number one issue for trade union leaders. Now, when we have a group of supporters, organizations that support trade unions, there are also very good cases when stories of success that show that at the national level, the social dialogue could be effective. I would be quite skeptical about figures. You mentioned that 83% of the countries use social dialogue as a tool of advocating people's rights, but I think we should be a little bit more cautious or skeptical about this. And one more message that I would like to deliver today is the role of labor inspections. For several years, the labor inspections have been suppressed, and sometimes the labor inspections were seen as an obstacle, but not a mechanism of support at work. One of the recent some recent examples in Moldova and Georgia a couple of months ago show that there is a trend of having an independent institution of monitoring labor relations, monitoring occupational health and safety risks. Thank you. I took too much of your time. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you, Anton. You always give a very profound view. And I took notes. In fact, you are coming to our recommendations. You are looking into the future. And now we are going to have a panel discussion. We have several trade union leaders that would like to speak, and there are also representatives of the academic community. I would like our panel experts to answer the question, what could be taken from these articles, what could be borrowed from the journal, from the publications, and how this could be used in your practical work. Anton said that it would make sense to adapt the document to people and also to regional specifics, because right now the journal is written in the ILO language and also is written in a very academic style. probably something could be also lost in translation. So we will see what to do about it. Elgius Baldis will talk on behalf of Latvian trade unions, and the next speaker will be Boris Kravchenko from the President of the Confederation of Labor of the Russian Federation. Then Sergio Sanchuk, Deputy Chair of the National Confederation of Trade Unions of Moldova. It would be also interesting to hear Alexei Zharkov from the Federation of Independent Trade Unions of Russia, who is also the member of the International Administrative Council of the ILO, and his participation in this authority, in this body, is important. So he will provide his vision as a member of the Administrative Council. Also, the regional perspective could be represented by Gocha Alexandria, who is an executive desk officer for Europe and Central Asia. And then I will ask Darina Suruchan, who is the Deputy Director of the Institute of Labor. The Center of Social Rights, the Director of the Centers of Social Rights will also speak today, because Alexander Nurik, to represent the economist's view, the social view, and Hari Talika from Estonia. He also has, but he potentially provides a lot of research for the ILO and ACTRAV, and also for the International Confederation. 5 minutes per person. There are so many people who will speak. Thank you for organizing this important webinar, and thank you to the researchers. I liked Anton's speech, and Anton, you are very critical about neoliberal movement, this neoliberal ideology. I like the fact that people emphasize not only the need for social dialogue, but also for a broad civil dialogue. Within the dialogue in our society, we tried to disassemble the dialogue into smaller sections. In our country, wages have grown, and the collective bargaining agreements now are working more effectively. The trade union members have exclusive rights for their members. Most importantly, together, arguing with the employers, we were able to create kind of a fist consisting of 5 organizations: the Confederation of Employers, the Chamber of Commerce, the Union of Self-Government of Latvia, and the Academy of Science. And together we designed proposals. We developed the proposals to put on the table for our government. And we have begun a serious discussion, not only related to epidemiological situation, but also to other issues. Last week, the government came up with a proposal that some occupations should have mandatory vaccination. Using Israel as an example, the Ministry of Healthcare of Israel showed that 36% of those who have been vaccinated are still prone to infection. even with vaccination, people are still at risk. As some employers or the government officials think that there are professional groups that should be vaccinated, but we understand that in fact, infections could be chaotically distributed. In Israel, for example, at the airport, all people are tested, both vaccinated and those who did not receive a two-dose vaccination. The European Commission said that we need to look at the latest data, that we still do not have enough data. We need to look globally at the development of the new variants. In the United States, for example, the Delta variant now is rampant, is spread. The number of infected people is 5 times higher than before. We understand that we need to have a widespread, cheap, undiscriminated testing, and if a person is infected, self-isolation should be mandatory. It could be even these people could be accommodated separately, and the government need to provide financial assistance to ensure self-isolation of infected citizens. There are people who have no symptoms at all, or 10% of people have symptoms unrelated to COVID-19 and still they're infected. If we need to detect people who are potentially dangerous, and all people need to try to strengthen their personal immunity. There are a lot of recommendations that could be given, but please remember that your health is in your hands. Valdis Egils, it's very nice to hear you, to listen to you, and Latvia is a country of the European Union with of a different economic and political formation. So trade unions work in different conditions. After the panel, after the presentations of our experts, I would like to give the floor for the summary and feedback to our authors, Yuka and Tanya.
Буквально несколько слов.
Борис Кравченко. I would like to express my gratitude for the materials presented in the journal. This was very interesting to read, and I would support, I would agree with my colleague from Latvia. It's very important, first of all, that this journal looks at trade union rights, the workers' rights in relation to civil rights in general, because we see what's going on in our countries, Belarus and even the Russian Federation. Independent trade unions are at risk during this period of lockdown measures. All kinds of public activities today are at risk, and we face severe challenges. We were able to consolidate and find a mechanism for internal communication. We provided our proposals together as trade union leaders to the Russian government. The trade unions insist on tripartite principle. We spoke about support to the most vulnerable wage workers and labor migrants. And our measures are crucial for our workers. We also supported measures to encourage small and medium-sized businesses to sustain jobs, and the Tripartite Commission has considered our proposals. Now, with a new wave of the pandemic, it's important to cover by employment benefits the most vulnerable groups of workers. I think now we have entered the third wave and the numbers are disastrous. I think we will face a new lockdown. It could impose restrictions on the social and economic situation in our country. And the independent trade unions of Russia opt for massive vaccination and the provision of vaccines for all. Another important outcome of the Confederation of Trade Unions is a draft law on teleworking. This is a high-quality document that was approved at the highest level. We thought for a while that this document will cover a limited group of occupations, but now I think that this law on teleworking would probably cover a large share of the population. I agree with Anton that the journal and recommendations in general should be adapted to local specifics and also to our common members. We are prepared to do this work. We are ready to share our internal methodologies and also we are ready to support the research centers that would work at the adaptation of the document to practical needs. And I'm sure that we will be able to present the results, your findings, to a wide public. Thank you. Thank you for this good initiative, and thank you for understanding that it's our common task, not only the task of the trade unions, but also the ILO and ACTRAV, and the contribution of trade union leaders from Russia is valuable. Sergio Sanchuk from Moldova. We are happy to greet a new edition of the journal that will serve for shaping the strategy of recovery from COVID-19 and will also pave the way to protection of workers' rights. When we speak about the role of trade unions in shaping a better reality, we need to also show how trade unions were able to protect their workers during the pandemic, and also how to trade unions, what was the, probably we need to organize dissemination of experience. It will be interesting for all. The research spoke about the paramount importance of the social dialogue. I think in Moldova, we use this tool, social partnership with the government and with the employers. We signed a memorandum. We signed a memorandum of cooperation on the improvement of the legal framework for guaranteed minimum wages in real sectors of the economy. We were able to negotiate with the employers' organization, also the establishment of a tripartite commission for considering labor disputes. Another achievement is compensations for COVID-19 tests. The role of trade unions or social partners in solving everyday problems is very high. We need to improve the mechanism of social dialogue. Unfortunately, in the past half a year, we had no functioning government. Yesterday, the parliamentary election was completed, and I hope that we will have reliable partners in the government, but most importantly, we need to find a common language, not only with the employers, but also with the government, and better to see the same things in the same light. The problem of labor inspection is very urgent for trade unions of Moldova. Last week, we signed an agreement with the labor inspection on cooperation in occupational safety and health, and also we will view cases of non-compliances with labor inspections, together with labor inspections. The journal is very important, not only for international trade union organizations, but it's important for smaller organizations, for all the members. And we could think how we could provide our data on the role of trade unions in the protection of their members' rights. Thank you. I'm very pleased to hear that you have that your joint work with the employer organizations is so fruitful. You had a lot of issues in Moldova. We understand that your situation is close to critical, but you are very positive about the future. Now, I would like to give the floor to Alexei Zharkov, the Federation of Independent Trade Unions of Russia, and then go to Alexandria. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Thank you very much. I would like to thank the authors of the publication for a large scope of work, and we will disseminate the journal among our member organizations. On the example of the Russian Federation, I would like to share specific problems that we faced during the pandemic and are still relevant for all the countries in our region. The first is the issue of teleworking. Boris Kravchenko mentioned that there is a draft law that will regulate remote work. This form of work now is used by many employers as a preventive measure against coronavirus. Last year, the number of teleworkers was 6 million people, 20 times more than before. This year, it's 6% of the total working population. It's about 3 million people in Russia. The trade unions now look very cautiously at this type of employment because a lot of issues are yet not clear. First of all, it's not clear how formal relations with the employer be arranged, how the working hours will be calculated, how can the working hours be calculated, will safety measures be guaranteed, and other issues. One sector where we observe a lot of changes now is the informal economy. And although the government is trying to take steps to push the self-employed out of the shadow economy, we think they're ineffective and one-sided. Self-employed or own account workers today are unprotected in terms of their rights and interests. The government is interested only in taxes, but not in the protection of their rights, social protection, and also retirement income. Informal workers are very vulnerable, and a lot of employers found a loop in the tax system and avoid making social contributions. As a result, legal formal contracts are eliminated, and more workers now are entering the army of informal workers. And another urgent problem for us is problems in the platform economy and the services sector, because restrictions in social contexts, for example, reduces the number of delivery orders, and so now their jobs are precarious. There is an instability in the platform economy and in services. There is a growing workload on platform workers, and also uncertainty in sustaining incomes. We faced giant non-compliances in the platform economy. Especially this is true about taxi drivers and delivery services. The ineffective legal regulation of the platform economy and the uncertainty of the workers' status are key problems that were detected by the pandemic, and they produce social discontent and protests. In May, when a new wave of COVID-19, a new outbreak of COVID-19 was urgent, the problem of unemployment now is also very topical. During the pandemic, the unemployment benefits were raised, but we don't believe that the unemployment benefits are enough to sustain at least the subsistence level. We do not expect that the pandemic will go back to normal reality by autumn or even by the end of the year, because we see that new variants of coronavirus now are widespread. All the forecasts that we made at the beginning of the year about the labor market prospects, the emergency response to COVID-19 could become normal or normal in everyday practice. We should expect structural changes in the economy, and we should expect also more vulnerable people in the hardest hit sectors. We could expect new forms of employment without any personal or face-to-face communication, new types of telework. I do hope that the recovery scenarios will take place instead of adaptation scenarios, and long-term measures will be introduced. I think we need to remember these risks, and we need to discuss more practical issues. But once again, thank you very much for your research, and stay in good health. Thank you for this broad picture, for outlining most important problems. Yes, the death toll now is growing, and the death toll in Russia is highest compared to the beginning of the pandemic. So we had a short break, but now the pandemic is back.
Включите микрофон, не слышно. Ну или напишите в чате мне тогда.
Несколько слов буквально.
Не, я потом, я просто спрашиваю, руку подняли, вы хотите выступить, да? Ну тогда давайте 3 минуты, и потом я попрошу, так как она должна оставить с нами временные еще некоторые рамки, потом я с некоторым обучением пару слов Дуню Краусе.
I would like to ask Dunya Krause also to speak while she is with us. And then I would like to ask also you, Katakala, to join the discussion. Now a short intervention from Belarus, from Sergei Cherkasov. Sorry to interrupt your discussion, but I will just say a few statements from my side. Thank you for your support that we feel from the International Confederation of Trade Unions. You support our civil society, also you support our right to collective bargaining, and especially our right to protests. We are now experiencing critical times, and your support is valuable. Also, I would like to say to express words of gratitude to the authors of the journal. This is a very important experience, and for the first time, the journal is presented for our region. We're looking closely at the global trend in protecting people, not only against the disease, but also against the impacts of COVID-19. And it's important that we have now valuable statistical data from the ITUC. And I also liked Yuka Takala's presentation on occupational safety and health. I would like to request information on how many countries and in which countries COVID-19 is recognized as an occupational disease. We are thinking now about this, and we are going to initiate a regulation on recognizing COVID-19 as occupational disease. Thank you for raising this important issue. Yes, for a year you have had political turmoil in your country, and we know that now the Confederation of Trade Unions is experiencing constant attacks at their leaders. But we will discuss with Alexander your proposal separately, and also with the International Confederation of Trade Unions, but not today. We have about 10 minutes left, and I would like to go back to our authors. Mrs. Krause, I would like to give the floor to this researcher first for her feedback. And I'm happy to say that Shima Clanahan has also joined our meeting. She could not join us for technical reasons at the beginning. And then the representatives of the academic community will be able to speak. And then we will start summarizing the discussion, and Gocha Alexandrev, from the desk office, will make concluding remarks.
Can I give now floor to you just for a few words and reaction? Okay?
Yes, of
as
course.
You need to leave us, I know.
Yeah, thank you very much in advance. Apologies, I will have to leave on time at 1. And I just wanted to really appreciate the variety of comments and reflections that colleagues were able to share. I think they underline, in my own interpretation, a lot of the points that we really feel make just transition so important, especially in these crisis moments, because it puts justice at the center. And I feel like the injustice is often the core of a lot of the struggles, not only of workers, but also of civil rights activists and people in general. And I think one of the points that I take from this meeting is really this issue of a common kind of building common task and building a common voice, maybe. How can we move from competition maybe between different workers' organizations and civil society activists towards more cooperation and alliance building and trying to really work towards a common goal? And I think there's still, it's going to remain a struggle, but it's important work that needs to be done to bring together people from different organizations and backgrounds, with also other CSO NGO partners, with people in the environmental and climate activist sphere, who are still kind of butting their heads together on many occasions, but I think ultimately are working towards a common vision and common goal of a fairer and more sustainable future. And yeah, thank you very much again for inviting us to present here.
Thank you, Dania. And I hope so we continue our cooperation, and your input, your work with our region is really required. Thank you very much. Have a nice day. And just Mamadou, can we give floor now to she? Because I can, yes, finally, so you're welcome. And we are very glad to see you as that finally connected. Unfortunately, we cannot give the same floor like it was in program because now we are a little bit round of time. But just if you can say a few words about, so just your article, I can add that we discussed already that it's an extremely important topic and we really appreciate and that we wish and we are planning to translate it into Russian. Maybe and in other languages of the region and adopt and to perhaps to make the separate event, which will be dedicated to trade union and human rights and social dimension. Please, yeah, floor is yours. 3 minutes 5.
Thank you very much, and my deep apologies for the system failure on multiple levels. I hope that my internet connection is strong enough that I'm not interrupted by that. Yes, very briefly, the article that we put together tried to, just building on the recent point that was made, to think about how to move away from competing spaces and to think about how that actually becomes our own social protection. So recognize the historical development of both in the global north and in the global south, kind of a universalistic view of the human right to social security compared to more specific interpretations of the right to social security within the framework of contributory systems. And certainly in low and middle income countries, this has become a very extreme challenge, let's say, in the context of COVID-19, where there is a need to fill the gap that has been left in social security and social protection systems prior to the pandemic, where there's a real need to fill these, but they're not going to be filled with sort of emergency responses. And indeed, you need this holistic vision of what a social security system and what a social protection system looks like. And so we present sort of a framework that's not a new framework, but maybe we can think about it in a new light in the context of COVID-19, of a multi-tiered and life cycle based system where different interests, and including sort of economic based interest groups, can see themselves in that system. And I think we try to make the point that trade unions are really fundamental actors in that process, and keeping these spaces of social dialogue open is what is really fundamentally important in that process. As countries go forward, including in Europe, as in response to changing labor markets, which is already a challenge, but also now with the pandemic revealing sort of new challenges, new gaps. This is really, really important that we that labor unions be on the front of articulating that vision of a universalistic social security system that has room for everyone, both on the tax finance side and on the contributory side, and that these not be viewed as competing spaces, as zero-sum games, as they are unfortunately too often in certainly in middle-income countries, but also increasingly in high-income countries, that these are the same populations we're talking about, that an individual over their life cycle, over their working life, goes in and out of contributory capacity. And therefore those systems need to be able to cater to people all along their life course and working lives. So we propose a few axes of action for labor unions that we hope are useful. And I won't get that because I realize that you've been very patient with technical difficulties, but I look forward to continuing our engagement on these very fundamental issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And so I'm sure that we will have also on face-to-face meetings that we will be back, because it's important to discuss and to see each other and not to suffer from the bad connection or existing connection or not. We really appreciate your work, and I can say on behalf of all of participants. Сейчас тогда мы переходим к нашей дальнейшей дискуссии. И я хочу дать слово Дарину Суручану. заместителю директора Института труда Молдовы,
I would like to give the floor to Darin Saruchan, the Institute of Labor of Moldova, that we use this research institution for different events and also surveys. How do you see the regional perspective as an important research institution? What could be your contribution, and also what could you borrow from the journal?
Спасибо за оказанную возможность участвовать в данном мероприятии. Очень полезное, особенно в ситуации.
Thank you for this useful event.
Мы находимся и в процессе развития вот этой третьей волны. Не готовы. Очень востребованный момент сейчас эти новые услуги, о которых говорил Мамаду. И, конечно же, как красной нитью проходит через все, что мы обсуждаем, тот карточный домик, о котором говорил Антон Лепик. Мы все оказались не готовы.
It's very interesting when Anton Lepik used a metaphor saying that our world is a house of cards that could be crushed by this.
Мало помогли нам в преодолении вызовов коронакризиса. Если вкратце рассказать о той деятельности, которую мы проводим как Институт труда.
Let me brief you on our activities as a research as a labor research institute. Our scope of work has changed with the changes and the outcomes that we are observing now in our country due to COVID-19. Together with we work together with the Confederation of Trade Unions of Moldova, and together we identified 3 objectives. First of all, expanding the potential for using the social partnership as a mechanism of fighting critical situations. Second objective, improving competencies of trade union leaders, and also strengthening the trade union's potential in organizing public events. One of the objectives is connected with training for trade union members. We understand that now we have to work online, and we have designed a training program with your participation, with the participation of different experts. We are designing training materials to support trade union leaders during the lockdown period. And the international journal that you are presenting today will be also used as part of our training content. We have a team of coaches that act both as experts and also as coaches. We appreciate your work, and in this journal you have very specific data, very specific information. I'm sure that we will make use of it in our training courses. Also, as many trade union leaders have mentioned today, we have lack of experience in dealing with very practical issues. It's important it's very important to share our best practices and to share our experience. I'm sorry, we're very short of time because the interpreter can be with us only for another 10 minutes, not more. Alexander Nurik, the Institute of Social Rights. I have very short comment. Last year and this year, the center had hundreds of complaints on non-compliances from trade unions members and from other workers. And one of the topics that is quite urgent is occupational health and safety, something that is presented in your journal. And I think there is independent research that shows that occupational diseases are rampant, and in fact, the services workers and the healthcare workers are at risk. So I could give you a lot of examples of non-compliances, but for us, this journal is extremely important, and all the recommendations that you give on the workers' rights, we could also contribute with our materials to this journal.
So now, as we have just still 10 minutes, we proceed with evaluation of our event, with finalization. And I would like to give a floor to Professor Jukka Takala, just to say a few words on, so from your side and to react what you hear, just Professor, 2-3 minutes.
Thank you very much. I think one question came up, that how many countries and what is the level of compensation of occupational COVID-19 as an occupational disease. Relatively few countries do it today. I know that, for example, in the Nordic countries, it is easily, you can get a compensation for COVID. Most of those are not really fatal cases, but they are absences from work and long-term sicknesses and even long-term effects of the COVID. And I think we have more than 1,000 people who have been already compensated for that, but also the numbers are relatively small in Finland, small country, and feel fairly well protected in the whole health system and government. But I think also in Italy, I have a close connection because our headquarters of the Commission cases, and that's exactly the source where we get our numbers. What are exactly the occupations? So I think it depends, but I would say that in the whole world, tiny fractions are today compensated. And clearly you can identify when the disease is compensable by tracking where did this contamination came from. But that needs also the tracking system must be in place. It is in place in some countries, but not in most countries, not at all. I think this, unfortunately, not well covered today. We should work on that, and how trade unions be strongly supporting this kind of and pushing for this kind of action. Thank you very much.
Kitos, thank you very much. And so we really appreciate your attendance and staying with us. And so an extremely important and excellent job done. So, and I'm sure we will have a separate meeting and continue our cooperation. So now we proceed with just to conclusions. And I would like to give a floor to Gocha Alexandria. Yes. Acting Director of the ILO Office for Eastern Europe and Central Asia. Yeah.
Да, пока руководители в отпуске находятся, иногда мы замещаем.
Yes, when our chief managers are enjoying their annual holiday, we step in their shoes. I know that some of you also suffered from self-isolation, and they were also victims of COVID-19. I wish everyone to stay healthy and continue your important work. Very briefly, summarizing on behalf of ACTRAV ILO, with the advancement of the pandemic, not only in our region, but across the entire world, we have an ideal storm now, an ideal storm that revealed not only the existing problems, but all the problems as one large ocean now are storming the world. The problems that were not so evident became new challenges and became visible. And from day to day, from month to month, the challenges are getting more acute. And we understand that new challenges could be expected. Our countries, the countries in our region are, in fact, low-income countries, especially in Central Asia. And many countries, I would say the majority of our countries are now indebted to the World Bank and to other financial institutions. So they have domestic debts, both the domestic debt and the external debt. And probably we could expect new austerity measures. Trade unions should be prepared to survive a period of austerity. But you know that the ILO ACTRAV will always support you in your tripartite dialogue. We will respond both to the requests from the employers' organizations, from the workers' organizations, and the government. From the start of the pandemic, our office was very active in providing support to all the countries. And for all the countries, we provided express evaluation of the labor markets. And after that, we started a round of analysis of the system of social insurance, social protection. Together with the ILO, many governments now have started adjusting their systems to a new reality. And the social dialogue in this respect is truly crucial. Not always the statistics show reality, and when we saw in a very positive light that 83 or 85% countries in our region are engaged in social dialogue. This is a very nice figure, but at the same time, at the sectoral level, at the enterprise level, the social dialogue is not as strong and productive. Notwithstanding this, we have stories of success. I do not have now time to give you these bright examples. In the past, we highlighted the importance of the formalization of the economy in our region. And now this issue also comes to the fore. This is a priority. Our region is dependent on labor migration. Some countries are host countries for labor migrants, and other countries are dependent on cash transfers from these migrant workers. Many countries are highly dependent on labor migration, and the pandemic affected negatively the situation, this segment of workers. And now a lot of countries are thinking of restructuring the economy to find financial room for social protection of labor migrants. In Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, for example, there are active efforts on supporting the government in expanding the social coverage to migrant workers. We are talking not only about the expansion of social coverage, but also on the adequate amount of social coverage, adequate size of benefits. But we can state that all the countries are serious about tackling these issues. Another issue is occupational health and safety, which is in focus of also of our attention. And you know that we have done a lot for trade unions. And whenever we had reports or claims about non-compliances, we reacted at once. You remember that we started a public awareness campaign in all the countries. Also, we provided assistance in having adequate levels of personal protection equipment to assist the social partners, and also we prepared videos to present them at your websites, talking about all the risks of the pandemic and all the threats. I can see that the trade unions of Uzbekistan, Armenia, Tajikistan here, and they used our videos and other materials in their public awareness campaigns. We're also supporting sectoral trade unions. For example, in Tajikistan, and in Tajikistan, trade unions were the first workers' organizations started talking about COVID-19 as an occupational disease and insisted that it should be on the list and it could be part of the collective bargaining agreement. It should be one of the items in the collective bargaining agreement. To wrap up the discussion, once again, thank you for your participation. You are doing a lot, and we need to recognize that notwithstanding all the challenges, financial challenges, membership challenges, our efforts are strong. We need to renew our work, to use innovative approaches, and also use the high-tech digital means, digital tools. We will stay in touch. I would like to thank all the experts. All the articles are interesting. We have a brief overview of the journal, but as Sergius and Mamadou said, we will translate the articles into Russian and will continue a round of events related to the journal.
Повторюсь, это на двух языках. Ну, мы все боремся за достойный труд и всегда говорим, ну и переводчик.
We're fighting for safety and occupational health. Don't forget that we cannot exploit the interpreter for a long time. So the interpreter will have to leave. Sorry.
Of course, we will discuss with Mamadou. We will evaluate all this. Our meeting, and we will send conclusions and recommendations, and we will implement. One is definitely, I see here my colleague Enisa. Enisa, I'm so glad to see you and all the friends from Southeast Europe. And Albanian President Gezinkala is with us, and so another and Bulgarian friends, and so we will organize probably also regional with assistance and with support with Sarajevo office regional presentation. It's local languages, Serbian, Croatian. And we will think also about translation to Serbian, Croatian of materials and some summaries. and then we can make a separate presentations, because it's extremely important and language is not an obstacle in this case. Europe is it's big region. In fact, it's in one, it's 3 or 4. So in fact, we need several presentations. And for Central Asia, maybe for South Caucasus, for Eastern Europe, I will discuss with Baltic Sea Trade Union Network and NFS again to make a presentation maybe on this Baltic Nordic area. And for Central Europe, it's another story. And so just of course, we need also to cooperate with regional trade union research and academic institution, and we have many, I can say, as on adaptation of all this text to the regional needs, and perhaps to discuss together with authors. As third one, we are waiting, and we encourage you to send articles and to prepare and to recommend also some regional researches, which is extremely important, and we have a lot. So I can say that it's just first step. It's just beginning, and we will continue. And of course, if you want to be competent, if you want to survive in all this ocean of problems, as Gotcha mentioned, it's not only pandemic, it's a different, so and anti-democratic tendencies, military conflicts, and natural disasters, everything come in one. But we will manage, it's for sure. So, коллеги, тогда значит, то, что я, как говорится, Европа, тут огромный регион в мотовском понятии, он это от Лиссабона до Японских островов, и потому, наверное, такие встречи будут регионально, может, отдельно для Центральной Азии, а для балтийско-скандинавских стран мы как раз имеем региональную такую структуру, сеть Бастун, Baltic Sea Trade Union, сеть балтийских профсоюзов и северных. А для Юго-Восточной Европы, и, конечно, наверное, надо будет, мы найдем возможность перевести это на местные языки, на сербско-хорватский, и сделать отдельную презентацию. Также отдельное, наверное, мероприятие я вижу, что требуется для Украины. Украина большая страна, много вызовов. Я очень рад и вижу, что и Наталья Левицкая, и Петр Тули, и Роман Кравчик, и другие украинские коллеги с нами. Вот что может тогда и на украинский, и сделать отдельную вот презентацию. Дальше, конечно, обязательно нужно, как Антон говорил, все это адаптация к национальной, региональной специфике, ну и может там вот пересмотр языка, и чтобы был понятный и не только исследователям, не только профсоюзным лидерам, но и доносить как-то это все до предприятий и до других, до рабочего места. И я что вижу, что тут каждое исследование требует отдельного вебинара. То есть мы сейчас показали, объяснили в очень сжатом и коротком. Ну, как все согласитесь, что по охране труда и ковиду, ну, тут, не знаю, тут недельное мероприятие нужно. По профсоюзным правам и правам человека, ну, тоже. По переходу, и чтобы как вот из этого плохого, вроде что дно уже достали, и сейчас должны от этого выйти наверх, ну, этот светлый, хороший верх, но я буду, что очень надеемся, что это получится. Ждем также письменно от вас предложений еще. У вас есть электронная почта и моя, и Гочи, и Магнус. Магнус не с нами, так как он в отпуске, но ему благодарен, он приглашение рассылал, Магнусу Берге. Антону всем посылайте, мы это все обобщим. И, конечно, я вам всем очень благодарен, что в середине лета, когда время отпусков и такое лето, вы нашли возможность, и все присоединились. Я еще раз от нас всех благодарю авторов. Вот и Макланах есть с нами, Юка Такала тоже есть с нами до конца. И благодарю Мамаду, моего коллегу, который, как я говорил, он двигатель этого всего. И все, вот одно из первых мероприятий как раз у нас произошло. Ну и, конечно, Елену Московский офис за помощь вот, техническую, и с переводом, и со всем чем. Конечно, благодарю переводчиков. Ну и всем нам удачи, здоровья и хорошего лета. So thank you very much, and so have a nice, warm, good summer. And let's continue our friendship and our work together. Bye.
Спасибо. Thank you very much. Всем здоровья, успехов.
Спасибо, Thank you.
Всем здоровья и успехов.
Спасибо, до свидания. До новых встреч.
Спасибо.
Спасибо огромное.
Bye. До свидания.
До свидания.
Bye. Goodbye. So.
До свидания.